He is the luckiest man in the world. At least that's what Doc says.
Yeah.
What's going on, Mr. Walton?
Bill, please, with my good buddy Steve.
Steve and Bill.
Yeah, Steve just made a movie.
I heard something like that. The luckiest man in the world, right?
Steve is like, yeah, okay, he's got it. And he's made a lot of movies, and they've all been really interesting.
Okay.
And I'm hopeful for that to be the case this time around.
30 for 30, ESPN. They made it. Steve directed it. Bill, you were the muse, correct?
Well, I'm the guy who sat there in front of the camera and was like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Here, let's try to fix this.
Right.
Let's see what love can do. Let's try to find the bright side of the road. Let's ring the chimes of freedom. And let's walk along in the mission in the rain, where some folks would be so happy to have just one dream come true. Yeah, some folks looking for that miracle. But I'm one of those guys who has been sadly faced with the tormented conflict in my life of all the things that I've tried to do but could only do halfway. How are you guys doing today?
I'm chilling. Steve, how you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Feeling good.
Steve, tell me something.
I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I met Steve. I knew of him. Not really knew of him, but I knew of his work.
Right.
You know, I'm a big hoop dreams guy because that's been my life too. And then, but my friends at ESPN, and then in collaboration with the NBA, I mean, the two most powerful media companies in my life. And I mean, these guys they're just driving it every single day. They came to me and said, "Hey, let's make a movie." I said, "Oh no, really?" And I said, "Why?" They said, "We got some interesting stuff here we'd like to share with the world." And well, I don't know anything about making a movie. I've never made a movie before. I've been in movies, but I've never made a movie before.
What is your favorite movie that you've been in?
Oh gosh, Ghostbusters.
I remember that.
Yeah, that was a big role for me, and I was there because the world was in trouble. Bill Murray called us all together, and he said, "We've got to take care of this." And so there we were up against it. We had no chance whatsoever, but through fortitude, through discipline, through sacrifice, and through honor, and working together to make for a better outcome, we came up with this incredible movie, Ghostbusters. Yeah.
Steve, let me ask you a question. As a director who has directed and just created masterpieces, how did you guys get work done? Because there's creative genius, there's energy. Like, what was the day in the life of you encapsulating what he was doing?
Well, we just signed up for the ride, right? And we spent a bit of time with Bill as he was in San Diego in his lovely home, but also with him in Portland and some other places. And we just we sat down with him at regular intervals to talk about different aspects of his life, but also wanted to hang with him some. Wanted to go see his mom with him, go see his old coach, go to Wallace Park, the great Portland outdoor park where Bill used to play when he lived in Portland. So, we just had an adventure, I think, is more than anything.
Now, for me, Scoop, it was a challenge. For Steve, it was a nightmare. Because Steve never really understood what I said at the beginning. When I've said my whole life that I was John Wooden's easiest recruit. I became his worst nightmare, and I drove the poor guy to an early grave at 99. And so here was Steve, who thought he had an idea of what he was getting into. And, when ESPN and the NBA call and they say, "Hey, let's do this," who was going to say no to those guys, right? And so they had all this archival footage. They had these dreams. They had these visions. And as my wife will tell you, Lori is the greatest everything ever. She'll just say that, "Look, man, this is a tragic nightmare. This is a train wreck going." And so Steve was trying to get on board. I think Casey Jones was the engineer out there. And so here he was learning, trying to find out all this different stuff along the way. And then the really tough logistical parts of us not living in the same area. He lives in Chicago and in Oregon. I live in San Diego. I only have one home. Steve has a number of homes. And then we had COVID, which really, because this project got started before COVID. And we were just lining everything up and getting all the interviews and trying to do all this work. And you know, when the ESPN came to me and said, look, let's do this. And we have to give great shout out on this program to Marcia Cook, who has shepherded this through to the very end. And then on the NBA side, John Horaeus, these two people who have worked together. And, you know, every one of my teammates, every one of my coaches will tell you that while I'm very proud and well, I try to be disciplined and live a life of honor, I'm also very stubborn. And so here it was, you know, I wanted a story. Steve had his idea of what the story was. And so what we all did was we worked together in a sense of collaboration, in a spirit of sacrifice to come up with a finished product that I'm honored and I'm privileged and I'm hopeful will be something that people enjoy. People will, you know, take something from it.
Tell me something, Bill. When I was kind of just reading about this doc, I did not realize how much you were intertwined with just civil rights leaders, people that you kind of interconnected with. Your time, I guess, playing basketball, who are some of the most remarkable people that you got to meet?
It's an endless list, Coop. And I want to add Steve James to that because the movies that he's made, the movie that he made, Abacus, which put me over the top. Because, you know, I'm much more of a reader than a movie guy. Because of Steve, in this project, I've gotten a lot more into movies and I enjoy them immensely. I'm a nonfiction, historical biography type reader and consumer of information. The news I get is primarily by reading. And you know, if there's a huge news day, I'll tune on. You know, I'll tune into the visual aspects of it. But what Abacus did for me, you know, which was the story of Steve James standing up for somebody and a group of people who just got the shaft. And that's kind of the way I live my life. And I'm the luckiest guy in the world. So many great things have happened in my life, including all the people that I've gotten to meet. And so it was a really a journey for me to try to come back and share all that stuff with me. Because while I try to learn from the past, try to dream about the future, I try to live for today. And what happened in the banking crisis of the 2000s and what happened with this group of Chinese people, and it just broke my heart. And I was super lucky in my life to be born into a world of hope, opportunity, peace, and love, and books and music, greatest parents in the world who encouraged me to live a life of curiosity, exploration, experimentation. And then that just led to all these other opportunities in my life as I was chasing it down. I found basketball when I was 5. I found my bike when I was 5. And that opened everything up. Right. Because like a book, I could go someplace, like a song, I could go someplace that I couldn't get to on my own.
Right.
And then at 8, I found basketball. And then when I was 9, I found Chick Hearn, who was this incredible fountain of life, of the dream, of happiness, enjoying the celebration that I try to make every aspect of my life. And it was incredible because then when I was 15, after finding Chick Hearn 6 years before that, I found the Grateful Dead, UCLA, and John Wooden. And then that just kept going. And then, you know, to be at that school with that platform, with that teacher in Los Angeles, and just so many different things happening every single day, every single moment. And I got to meet literally everybody who I wanted to meet. And the guys who I wanted to meet, who I didn't get to meet, were all assassinated. You know, because in my life, in my lifetime, the people who stood up, like Steve James stood up in Abacus, like hopefully he stood up here with Luckiest Guy in the World, when Steve James stood up for Allen Iverson, all those people, they were assassinated. You know, JFK, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy. You know, these are my heroes growing up. And then they're dead. And then John Lennon gets killed. And why? They get killed because they stood up for the little guy. And that's why I'm just so happy that the Denver Nuggets are the best team in basketball right now, because forever they have been the little guy. And they have just been shunted aside. For them, it's always been talk. They delivered. And I like people who deliver, and I want to be one of those guys. And I hope that I wasn't so much of a nightmare for Steve James that as we move forward past this project, that he'll still take my calls. I know that John wouldn't. He was very reluctant to take my calls for all the years, but eventually I would get him on the phone now and again.
How did you and John Wooden bury the hatchet?
I realized, Scoop, the very first day of my time in the NBA, that, oh my gosh, this is really different. And, you know, I was 21 years old before I ever encountered anyone that didn't have my best interest at heart. And then I joined the NBA. And when I joined the NBA, I was unable to play in the game of life. I was injured all the time, so I couldn't play the game that I loved, and nobody believed that I was injured. And then, as a lifelong stutterer, I could not explain myself. I could not express myself. And so here I was coming into the NBA, unprepared, unsuspecting, and undiscerning. And now, all of a sudden, I'm there, and it's totally different from anything I had ever experienced in my life, totally different from the dream I had, the dream I wanted. And so I realized right then and there that I had made a terrible mistake with John Wooden. I immediately went back to him. I apologized, told him sorry for ruining his life, sorry for wasting his time. And then I promised myself and him too that I would quit causing him grief and consternation. And so I spent the rest of my life, or the rest of his life, because that was 36 years after I left UCLA, that he still stayed alive. And so I promised him that I would try to do better, try to be better, and try to do more on the bright side of the road. And I'm not sure that he ever accepted that or if he ever really understood it, but I tried my best, as I did with this film. You know, the luckiest guy in the world, that's me. And, you know, so many great things. People have always been nicer to me than I deserve. And so, here I was, and now at UCLA, and my very first day there, I found Ernie Vanderway, one of the founding members as a player of the NBA. And so from that point on, in the fall of 1970, everything good in my life could be traced to Ernie Vanderway. Now, Ernie passed away. So many of the guys in my life have passed away. And so Steve was not able to interview all these people for my life. And, Steve, he came in with his idea of who I am, who I was, and what had happened. And I don't know, we're going to have to let him explain how it played out for him with his preconceived notions. Steve?
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask you that, Steve. How did your perception of Bill change after completing the project?
Well, I'm only a couple of years younger than Bill. So I followed Bill's career. And I grew up in Virginia, and I used to stay up and watch UCLA games from Pauley Pavilion after the late news. I don't know why.
And black and white television.
That's right. I don't know why they were broadcasting those games back in Virginia, but they were. And so they would come on at like 10:30 at night and out on the weekends. And so I would stay up and watch UCLA and watch Bill and marvel at that team and at his performance. So I was a fan from, as early on as I could be. I didn't grow up in San Diego, so I didn't see him play in high school. But So, I knew of Bill's career. I knew of the struggles he'd been through, but only had a cursory understanding, really, of all that his life had been and his career had been. And so, this project, every film I do is like a profound discovery, Some of it I learn, or I get some sense of it from reading his biography or reading Breaks of the Game by David Halberstam, or other books that have featured Bill's life. But there's nothing like the direct experience, of course, of just spending the time. We probably talked over the course of the 2 years that we were filming. We probably sat down a dozen times for just interviews, and those are just the interviews.
It was only 2 years. Seemed like at least a decade. Huh.
But I got a much stronger sense of what he had been through, both the highs and the profound lows, that because he opened up and really talked about that. We spent one interview that ran about 3 hours just alone talking about the injury. It was just the focus of that whole interview was the injuries and the surgeries that he'd had over the years. And that was a 3-hour interview, and we still didn't get to it all. So it gives you an idea of how much was there to learn and understand in this story. And that's why it went from, ESPN originally wanted a standalone film. And, it didn't take me long to realize that I really wanted to do something that was more ambitious than that and do a docuseries. And so after a while, I convinced them that was the way to go. And of course, when I told Bill the good news that we were now doing a 4-part docuseries, he was like, "What about 5? How about 6? That was Bill Russell's number. We should do 6."
Five was my number on the Celtics because Kevin McHale had already taken 32. I should have played him for it the very first day I got there. Bill Russell was my favorite player. So I went from 5 hours to 6 hours, and I wanted it to be longer. And I wanted it to be more about my teammates and more about the people in my life. But Steve's director, and he, and one of the really good things about this whole project is that none of the discussions were acrimonious and none of the negotiations, and they all went totally smooth. And it was fantastic because everybody wanted to have the best project imaginable. And so here we are. And I'm hopeful that it's going to be, something that means something to other people, because that's the life that I try to lead. The people who I want to hang out with are people that mean things to me. And it was sad for me because of COVID and because of limitations and restrictions of time and all this sort of stuff that, 3 of the most important people in my life did not make the total film, but they did make the editor's cut available on ESPN Plus.
Cool.
So Lenny Wilkins, who was my first pro coach and was phenomenal. And you talk about somebody getting the shaft. Lenny Wilkins got the shaft. And if you don't ever believe that, read his book, Unguarded. Because Lenny is as classy, as dignified, as professional as they come in life, as nice a person, kind, generous, everything you want in a human being. And, he got the shaft in Portland, and I'm responsible for that because I was hurt. I couldn't play and I couldn't talk and I was unprepared. And Lenny took the fall for that. But it's a long list of coaches in the NBA who have been fired because my feet wouldn't perform. My feet wouldn't allow me to play the game that I love. And so here it was, Lenny was the first of those, and that's a heavy burden to carry. And the other guy who got in there in the editors got Mickey Hart, as important as I have. And he's just there all the time in my life as the music plays. And then there's Danny Ainge. Danny Ainge, who grew up in Oregon, and Danny Ainge, who was a big Blazer fan, and Danny Ainge, who had seen this whole thing, this whole tremendous team come together in a short period of time. Because when Jack Ramsey became the coach, when they fired Lenny because of me and hired Jack Ramsey, Jack got rid of so many different. I think there were 7 new guys on the team, and we won the championship. And to this day, we're the youngest team to ever win the championship. And then I got to know Danny over the course of his life. He's quite a bit younger than I am. And then I got to rebound for him on the Boston Celtics. And there was a lot of rebounds to be had there. And I also got to guard his man. And I also got to inbound the ball to him. And so it was super fun to be with him on that Celtics squad. He was a critical component. I'm shocked and dismayed that Danny Ainge is not in the Basketball Hall of Fame, but I wish they had all made the totality of the film and not just in the director's cut. Because when they were interviewed for the director's cut, they all did. Lenny, Mickey, and Danny, they all did a tremendous job. Treated me nicer than I deserve.
We all work in basketball, but I would imagine that we're all also fans of the game. Question for both of you. How much, we were all in the house during COVID, at the height of COVID, how much did The Last Dance change the perspective of how we view basketball as not just a sport, but a lifestyle, and the twists and turns of what the day-to-day life is of a basketball player?
I'm going to let Steve take that one. He's the movie maker. He's the one who's had the experience with movies changing people's lives, and hopefully he will transition that into Roger Ebert's movie that Steve did, and the transitional nature of life that Roger went through. Yet Roger stuck with the whole thing to the very end, and I love that Bulls team as great as they were, and I just shocked and dismayed. Those words are not strong enough to relate my feelings as to the way that Scottie Pippen treats Michael Jordan. That's just not right. But Steve, you talk about The Last Dance and its impact on our world.
Well, I think The Last Dance was a terrific docuseries that came at the perfect time for American sports fans, like you said, Scoop. There wasn't any sports being played. Everyone was holed up at home. And for people, I'm a Chicago guy, so I followed the Bulls and was a big Bulls fan. For anybody who's a basketball fan, but especially people who were a fan of the Bulls from that time, it was catnip or crack cocaine or whatever you want to call it. It was, it was perfect. It was perfect. It was the perfect kind of, thing to watch. Now, I don't think the series does, David Halberstam's book on Michael Jordan is the quintessential treatment of Michael Jordan. And he didn't even get to interview Michael Jordan. He was supposed to, but he didn't get to. And if you read that book, you'll see the profound influence that I think that book had on The Last Dance, because it is structured, the series is structured very much like David Halberstam's book on Michael Jordan. So if you were a huge fan of The Last Dance, I urge you to read David Halberstam's book, because it's, he was a remarkable journalist in every respect, and there's probably never been as great a journalist who was such a huge basketball fan and knowledgeable basketball fan as David Halberstam. So, there's a lot of great docs out there, a lot of great docuseries out there being made, but Last Dance was a really good one that came along at the perfect moment. And I think that contributed greatly to its lore.
Yeah. Bill, you talked about Danny Ainge.
I was the broadcaster for those Bulls teams on the national level.
The NBA on NBC.
And
right.
Like the luckiest guy in the world, it was a remarkable privilege and honor to have that position and to witness the greatness of that team. And I'm a team guy. I love the team game. That's why I'm super happy with what happened with the Denver Nuggets. Because, the team game, the passing, the selflessness, that's always what leads to ultimate group dynamic success. And that's what the Bulls had. And they had a fantastic coach in Phil Jackson. They had an incredible city with a spectacular fan base. And then, they had all these players, so many of them who were in the Hall of Fame. Let's see, Tony Kukoc Hall of Fame, Jerry Krause Hall of Fame, Scottie Pippen Hall of Fame,
Dennis Rodman,
Phil Jackson Hall of Fame, Tex Winter Hall of Fame, Dennis Rodman Hall of Fame. And at the end of the day, then you have Michael Jordan,
yes,
who was the personification of excellence in all things, on and off the court. And, they delivered. And, they played together. They played to win. And, the drama was always there. And the ability of NBC and Dick Ebersol and Ahmad Rashad and all the guys who were telling the stories, it was fantastic. And, hopefully that our team here, Zach Piper, who was the sound man for the film The Luckiest Guy in the World, and then Jackson, not Jackson Brown, but Jackson James. He was the cameraman, and it was and then Steve's wife Judy and their other two children, who were very successful in their own right, and the way that they all pulled it together. And we went down to Austin, Texas for the premiere at South by Southwest. Steve had this, I thought it was just a few guys who were working on this film, right? And we get to Austin and we have this post-premiere party, and my goodness, it was tremendous. It was like being, at a Grateful Dead concert. There were just all these happy people who had come with a purpose and come with a mission, and then at the end of the day, they were happy. And but at the end of the day, we always want more. And that's what I want. I mean, when I read David Halberstam's books, I read them all with the exception of Breaks of the Game. It was just too personal. I don't read about myself. I don't really talk about myself. And that's one of the challenges that Steve James had with trying to make this film, was that, I'm a team guy. I'm not a self-promoter. I'm not looking for attention. I want the team to win. And he wanted to tell a story of self-adulation. He wanted to tell a story of
That's not true.
of being impressed with my stats.
sure.
And that's not me.
I just wanted to tell the Bill Walton story, whatever that was.
My story on the basketball court is to win the game. That's what matters to me. And my story away from basketball is to try to help as many people as I can, to try to make the world as fair and equitable a place as I can. And while I continue to run into hurdles, the difficulties that I had playing basketball, that because of my feet, the game itself was never a problem. I just couldn't answer the bell because my feet were always broken. And then the difficulty that I had speaking. When I talked about the early days of being the luckiest guy in the world, it wasn't until I was 28 that I found Marty Glickman. I found Marty Glickman through Ernie Vanderlei. And Marty Glickman's own personal story. I wish that Steve would make a movie. HBO has already made a movie about Glickman, so I'm not sure on that because they do a tremendous job. But Marty Glickman changed my life. Nothing has changed my life more than what Marty Glickman gave to me, which was the ability to learn how to speak. Remember when Coach Wooden was so mad on the day that Marty Glickman died, because Coach Wooden, as he was, in his late 90s at the time, and I was there with him when the phone rang, and Coach Wooden became the king of obituary. But at the end of the interview, singing the praises of Marty Glickman, this incredible force of nature like few others, who changed the world in so many positive ways, but also facing devastating anti-Semitism. Coach Wooden said to the reporter, "I'm really mad at Coach Wooden. I'm really mad at Marty Glickman because while he taught Bill Walton how to speak, he didn't teach him how to stop talking."
Woo!
Yeah, that was the headline.
Let me ask you a question.
The headline for The Luckiest Guy in the World has not been written. And time will tell.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hopeful for. I'm hopeful that the response from my friends has just been overwhelming, and it's staggering. It's staggering because you never know. Life is like a Grateful Dead concert. Life is like a basketball game. Life is sitting down in front of the camera with Steve James peppering you with all these questions. They're like, what are you talking about? Why do you keep asking me to explain what I've already said, right? And you just never know how it's going to play out. And to me, it's like a bike ride. You go out on a bike ride, you have no idea what's going to happen. You have no idea if you're going to die, if you're going to get hit by a drunk driver, you're going to get hit by a texting driver, or the rain is going to come in, or the wind is going to start blowing. You're going to have a mechanical. You never know. And so you just got to be ready. And I was not ready when I started.
Do you ever ask yourself, look in the mirror, or just constantly revisit, what if my feet injuries did not happen? How much more career-wise would I have accomplished?
I try not to, and I don't want to. I want to look ahead. I want to see what love can do in the world. Try to live a life of peace and love, and share that with other people. And I also want to do the best that I can with what I've got at this moment. Now, over the course of my 70 years, so many great things have happened to me, but also so many things that have happened that have limited me in what I can or could do. What I try to focus on, Scoop, is the things that I can do. And while I have not been able to play basketball in now 37 years, I can still go in the pool. I can still go in the weight room. I can still ride my bike. And I've already done all those things today. I can still read. I can still play the piano. I can still play the drums. And I can still be on a show with Steve James and reminisce about the fun we had and the challenges that we had and the effort that was put in. Because, that's what I asked for in life. Oh, look, I scared him away already. And,
I have to plug in my computer.
That's usually done before the show starts.
I didn't know we were going this long.
I wanted it to be longer. As Coach Wooden said, failing to prepare is preparing. And so get some solar panels on that computer, Steve. But it was a situation in my life where I have not had any of my limbs amputated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm alive, and there was times in my life that was not in my future. And I'm 70 years old. I'm married to the woman of my dreams, who I met 33 years ago. And Lori is the greatest everything ever. Now, she's not a thing, but I can't think of a better word than everything. So she remains the greatest everything ever. I'm madly in love with her. We have 6 children and 14 grandchildren. And, when my spine failed back in 2008, not shortly, but after that, I found Pat Kilkenny and Ted Roth, who we tried to get part of this film, but that didn't work out there. But they took over for Ernie Vandeweghe as the guys who have been looking out for me and trying to help me get to what's next in my life. And I'm 70 years old, and I just found Jerry's middle finger. And so I am the luckiest guy in the world. And it's all happened for me. And now, and I'm not sure if Steve, to this day, if he believes that I am the luckiest guy in the world, but I believe it. And that's what counts, because, when you're trying to get where you need to go, where you want to go, you've got to have that belief that this is going to work. If you don't believe, if you don't have the hope, one of the things that we suffered through with all the hypocrisy and the con artists and the scammers that have been so negative to our world trying to move forward to a better place is their promotion of the notion that hope doesn't even exist anymore. The promotion of the death of hope that started, in the 1980s when it was just such ridiculous notions of selfishness and greed, and I got mine, and to heck with everybody else. That's not the world that I live in. And so as we're moving forward here, I believe, and I know full well that I am the luckiest guy in the world. I'm alive. Lori's still here, and I'm talking to Scoop and Steve about a movie that Steve just made about the luckiest dude in the world. And I know that guy, although that guy has changed quite a bit from the very beginning when Steve was trying to put this film together. And the people who we interviewed, it goes way back. It was sad that David Halberstam was already passed away. He's got some nice clips in there, I believe, if they made the final edit. And then Chick Hearn was dead, and Coach Wooden was dead, and my first coach Rocky. All these people dead in my life. And fortunately, Steve was able to get. He was able to get Greg Lee. Greg Lee, a critical part of my life, and Greg has passed away since that interview, and it was very sad, and it's changed everything. And Greg had 25 years of physical misery, but on the days that he was able to sit with Steve and try to explain what was going on out there. But I have to give credit to all the different people who did take the time and make the effort to make a contribution to this film. And, Sam Smith, Bob Ryan, absolutely fantastic. Robert Parrish, oh my.
Chief.
Then Jamal Wilkes and Lucius Allen and Kareem and Larry Bird and Kevin McHale. Casey Jones and Red Auerbach are both dead. And so, a lot of, Jerry Garcia. But we should have got John Mayer. We did get Bob Weir and Steve Parrish from the Grateful Dead, but we were under severe limitations in a lot of ways. And I don't like limitations. I don't like boundaries, but that's me. And I was not the boss on this project.
Steve, you are the boss. Is he the luckiest man in the world?
Well, the reason we titled it The Luckiest Man in the World is because, as this interview has made clear, Bill likes to say he's the luckiest guy in the world, and he says it frequently. And, and he says fantastic a lot too. And, any objective look at his life, even from what he said in this interview, I don't think a rational person would conclude that Bill has been the luckiest guy in the world. He's had an injury-marred career. He's had plenty of troubles, even after his career ended, physical things to overcome. So, he hasn't been the luckiest guy in the world. But I think the reason we title it that is because, as he's said here better than I can say, it's how he's chosen to live his life and to focus on the things that he has been given and the things that he has accomplished and the things that he is still able to do. And that's what makes him the luckiest guy in the world. And that's why we wanted to call the film The Luckiest Guy in the World.
And one of the challenges, Scoop, in a project like this is that it's my life and Steve has control over the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
We've had many discussions about my answers to his questions. He was the editor and he was doing that. And so, that's where the hopefulness comes in. And, one of the challenges was that I'm a deadhead and Steve is not. And I assume Steve has a wonderful taste in music, but that's his taste. And
now, actually, the editor on the film, who did a remarkable job, David Simpson, is a deadhead, and that's why that he had a lot more to do. And Bill doesn't remember this because I talked to Bill so many times, but I did ask Bill for a list of some of his favorite songs, which he did give me, and which was considered in our whole
considered
process.
Is the right word.
No, but here's what I'm happy to report, Scoop. If you go online, and I'm not on Twitter, but I have friends who are, and I have deadhead friends who are, The response to the film from the Deadhead community has been overwhelmingly positive, and we have heard from so many of them how much they love the choices that were made for the music in the series. We've heard that countless times. I was just on a radio show with a Deadhead that knows you really well, Bill, that was at a concert with you a month ago, Paulie somebody. And he went out of his way.
San Francisco. Paulie and Mac from San Francisco.
Right. Paulie went out of his way to say, I can't believe how wonderful the music is in this series. You guys nailed it. So I don't take credit at all for that. I give that credit to Bill's list, but also very much so to my editor, David Simpson, because you know what, Scoop? I'm a team guy too. And
we have to give credit to Marcia Cook and Burke Maggie.
What Marcia Cook did, which was amazing, is that she went and got us the music that we wanted, which was no easy task. But Bill helped with that too. It was a team effort. So what I'm saying about, I can't believe I'm keeping him from talking, but what I'm saying is that this process was a collaborative undertaking. I listened to Bill's thoughts and feelings about all of this from every respect. It's part of the way I make films. It's the way I've made films going back to Hoop Dreams, is that I involve the subjects in those films. I am not the boss in the sense that you might think when you think of the boss. Frankly, ESPN's the boss ultimately on this. And so I am a very collaborative team guy as a filmmaker in the way that Bill was as a basketball player. And that's the way I've chosen to live my life and the way I've chosen to do my work.
And as Steve said, he listened to me, reminiscent of John Wooden's words to me when I would question him about everything.
I made changes that Bill wanted in the
about the cheerleaders, about my hair, about my clothes, about shaving. Coach Wooden would listen as Steve listened. And then he would finally just roll his eyes and wave me off and say, you know, Bill, it's all fine and good that you think that way, but I'm the coach here. And while we've enjoyed having you, we're going to miss you.
That's not true.
And if I don't get off this show, I'm going to miss what's next for me. And I've got to be there because people are waiting. So
before you go,
yes,
Nikola Jokić.
Oh, fantastic.
He does so many different things. He can shoot, he's the point center of that squad.
James is already working on the Nikola Jokić movie.
Is it?
So, yes. And so here's this remarkable visionary artist, Nikola Jokić. He's the starting center.
Now, who's working on the movie?
Steve James. And believe me, that's already in the works. And so it's so fun to watch him play because, you know, he's the leader of the band and he does it so many different ways. And the package that he has of physical capabilities, skill level, and a mind and a heart and a soul, his commitment to the team and to winning the games, and the way he runs, the way he moves, the way he dribbles, the way he passes, his position rebounding, his help on the way that he provides to make his teammates the star of the game, and his hands. His hands are just absolutely remarkable. You know, that ball touches his hands and the ball is moving in a good direction from there. And I just wish that I could do that with my life, that when the ball comes my way, that I could redirect it into a more positive direction. And Nikola Jokić, I love that guy. And I'm just so happy for him. I'm so proud of him. And because Nikola Jokić is like the rest of us in that, you know, he's trying to live his life. He's trying to go through and get the job done, trying to be Nikola Jokić. And so many other people are trying to force him into being somebody that he's not. And that's why I'm the luckiest guy in the world. I learned that years ago. And I find myself standing in the middle of the mainstream. And Nikola Jokić, the future and he will inspire so many next great players. And when Steve talked about David Halberstam's book, and I love David Halberstam, one of the books I want to recommend about Michael Jordan is when Sam Smith, who wrote Sam's book, There Is No Next. There is no next. And just the way Sam lays it out, absolutely incredible. And, but there's so many books to talk about. We're going to have to come back and do another show. Yes. We're going to have to, and when Steve finally understands that we should do a whole nother 4 hours of the luckiest guy in the world and get into the other stuff that we didn't get into in the first 4 episodes, then we've got a real chance here. So, Steve, thank you. Tell Judy hello, and tell Zach and the other 2 children hello, or tell Zach hello, and all the people that came to Austin. What a fun time that was. And Steve and his team hosted this really fun party, and Lori and I got to go. And it was just something that I will never forget. I am the luckiest guy in the world. And now that I've found Jerry's middle finger, I have a chance at a full and complete life.
Yes,
and
sir.
with that, they're waiting for me. Oh my gosh.
Throw it down, big man. I
Throw it down one time, please. Yeah. Here we go.
Bill.
Throwing it down. The luckiest guy in the world. That's me.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for my life.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for my life.
Thanks.
I'll see you later.